All right, we kept you waiting for 3 minutes. We're so sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Welcome back to the Wake Up Call on X on 4.3 FM. Okay, so this morning we have the major on the inside with us. We're going to be talking about the Russia Ukraine conflict, a very unfortunate occurrence in the world right now. Good morning, welcome back. I just say welcome back, no stranger to Extreme FM. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Crystal. Quite well.
You don't have to be so far from me. You can come in a little bit more.
Oh, I love those invitations.
Oh,
I'm doing well, Crystal.
okay.
I'm quite at peace with myself, as I like to say.
Mhm.
Good morning to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to the best songs around Extreme Radio.
All right, all right. You see why you see, yeah? Okay, great. Let's move on. So the most recent updates on the Russia-Ukraine conflict are from two angles. One, the emergency special session of the UN General Assembly. Did you get a chance to take in what Ambassador Ron the King said?
Yes, I heard several takes about it. It was interesting
Was
because of that. Because I think she had to stumble through it a little bit, which means that she probably didn't have enough time to proofread the subject matter before. By and large, the direction was good. There were one or two statements that raised the eyebrow. They used the expression special military operations, which is Russia's language as against an invasion. One had to take note of that. But in the end, I listened even the report on the voting, and the British ambassador, I think, was said that St. Vincent gave a spirited response, and so he gave
yeah,
credit where it is due. I'm glad they're speaking to the truth.
yeah. It was well done, well done. But you said she fumbled through it a little bit. Are you implying that she did not pen it, and it was just her reading it?
No, that's not her language. That's the prime minister's language, and nothing is wrong about that. Nothing about that. She can't go off on her own as an ambassador either. She may have significant input into it, but ultimately she has to reflect the foreign policy of the country. And even if the foreign minister was driving it, one will still hope that he reflects the views of his or her prime minister, whatever country that is. So that's how it's done.
Hmm.
So it's a convergence of those views.
Right, right. So up until that delivery, many persons were asking and waiting impatiently to hear what Saint Vincent and the Grenadines had to say about the invasion by Russia on Ukraine. You know, there were talks about the letter, the private letter coming from the Prime Minister. He released it yesterday. Your thoughts on what he had to say?
Well, I think that there were many footballs in that exercise. Sometimes the prime minister just loses himself and loses his way. There was no need for the drama of for him one writing a private letter,
Mhm,
and two feeling that he had to shut out his citizens from the contents of the letter.
mhm.
As it transpires, that letter must have been a very painful pill for him to have to swallow.
Aye.
Well, you can see that he was in fact dealing with one who, by his claims, he had very close relationship with for some time,
Mhm.
and obviously in the circumstances had messed up, and that there was no way that he could extricate his friend or himself from the imbroglio that had come upon them as a consequence of that decision to invade Ukraine. And so he had to make a statement. You notice it was not just he had a few statements before that, because the one that I have seen says his final letter, which means that there were letters before the one that was in fact issued in the end. Some people want
I
to say,
didn't pick that up.
well, you didn't
No,
pick
no,
that
no,
up.
no, I did
Well,
not.
I've heard people
No.
say that they have been exposed to the original drafts. I don't know how they got that. I'm staying away from that. That sounds a little bit promising, doesn't it? But be it as it may, that the admonition was important. That the admonition was important because it's just not the way to do international business.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so let me ask you this. If you were in Dr. Gonzalez's position, what would you have done differently?
Well, on the whole Ukraine matter,
Yeah.
oh, Very many things.
Mhm.
Very many things. There's also danger, Crystal, in my mind, for leaders of states, even when providing leadership, to get too far ahead of his citizens. And matters of this, and he still hasn't done that as yet. You need to take your people into your confidence and have a proper conversation with them. So that last Wednesday, I broke news on this matter when we pivoted on a radio station that we frequent. To say I'm going to continue with the quarrel discussion.
Mhm.
And the Russia-Ukraine thing was of the movement.
Mhm.
Up to that time, the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines hadn't spoken.
Mhm.
And I drew him out. I said in the normal course of events, you would have heard him pronounce on matters like this that involved his neighbors, Cuba or Venezuela, and what was holding him back. Well, clearly he figured that there was some bad news here and that he didn't want to address that. Now, if you contrast that with the Prime Minister of Barbados, who's been providing very effective leadership, she took her nation into her confidence and she spoke to the issue and brought Bajans along with her
Mhm.
from day one. So they know what they were addressing. So it wasn't the Prime Minister and the Russian President, it was the people of Barbados who were engaged in this exercise because she spoke to them so that she could get buying. That is also always important.
Mhm.
And I think it was unfortunate that the Prime Minister put himself as well. Look, I'm not so sure that you people can handle tough news, hard news, and difficult news. So the contents here is not your business, at least not yet. I don't think Vincent's that dumb. And he reinforced that distance between himself and his people sometime later when he referred to us as an echo chamber. We're not echo chamber, we're not children. We are a mature society or a maturing society. You're speaking to big people
Mhm.
and you have to speak to them respectfully all along. Over and beyond that, Krista, it is my considered view that while many Caribbean countries can speak and have spoken to this issue,
Mhm.
St. Vincent and Grenadines has a unique interest into this matter in that our diaspora community, and here I target United Kingdom, includes a significant percentage of military
Mhm.
who are there by our invitation and our promotion. That is our sons and daughters who are in the Navy and the Army. So more often than not, when we are engaged in international discourse and of a military nature, all people, all Vincentian sons and daughters, are on the front line. Flip that script. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as they would say in America, we have a lot of military parents who are impacted directly when their sons or daughters have to go on the front line and go to war. So when we speak to that issue, we other people speak to it in a generic kind of way,
Mhm.
but we stand at the risk of losing bodies. For those who may be mobilized through NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization Command, many of whom are already now in Poland, and I can speak to that, and many who are on alert in Germany in particular,
Mhm.
um, who have to face war. So we pay for these things with our blood. And that means we have to have that conversation with the parents of our soldiers. You hardly ever hear the President of the United States of America speak about without saying, God bless the United States of America, God bless our troops. Always very dear to the people. And a common expression in America is always, thank you for his service. People distinguish and identify military service as almost paying the supreme price. And finally, Krista, the responsibility, and it's related to that, because the responsibility of all prime ministers, leaders, first responsibility is to keep their people safe. The safety of the citizens is their primary concern, first and foremost.
Mhm.
Then you proceed to the other things. And in the way he messaged, he, he leapfrogged over a number of those things. He's getting there now, and we can address other issues as to where he is at now and his own comfort zone at this time.
Mhm. But he also mentioned that CARICOM made a statement. So isn't it sufficient? We are on the CARICOM, of course. So isn't it sufficient that we automatically assume the outlook of CARICOM?
We should.
Mhm.
But his statements disaggregated. He said, look, I have issued a private letter. Now, as it turns out, it's not a private letter. A private letter would be a letter would be on the letterhead of Ralph E. Gonzalez, not the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines. It's a difference. And the letter that we have seen or have been exposed to is a letter from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines. That's public business. That's public business. And so for a little while, he had us holding our hands to make a determination whether his pen pal letter, as some others have described it properly, had a different perspective to the contents of the CARICOM position. Now it turns out that by and large we are in sync with CARICOM, and that's a good thing.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Listen, if you want to send us a question or a comment, you have to do so via WhatsApp only. Or we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at Extreme 104 SVG. All right, so you can drop a comment there if you so desire. All right, 4301043 is the WhatsApp. Let's head on over to Russia, Ukraine. Now, there was a little bit of tension leading up to Russia deciding to invade on Ukraine. Ukraine is a sovereign country. I'm not sure if you're able to take us to go back a little bit as to what led up to that point. I know Ukraine was once a part of Russia, and they parted ways, and Ukraine trying to hold on to their independence. What would have led up to Russia saying, okay, let's go in, let's do what we have to do or what we want to do? Who cares about if Ukraine is an independent country or what? I mean, you're a military man, so expect that you are, keeping up with these things in fine detail.
Yeah. Well, you see, it depends on how far back I go. And that will determine whether we then contextualize the discussions in terms of people who once in charge of empires, as they call them, in which vast land masses belong to, in a sense, the motherland. So, in the simplistic views of Russia, Ukraine was part of that culturally, politically, geographically. They come now, of course, off the same land mass. So we are one. That's a perspective. We in our past are accustomed or know of, is a better way to put it, of what we talk about, of our colonial experience. We are not one land mass, but we know we came out of our relationship with England. So we have language, we have the law, the legal system that is, and we have had historically exchange relationship of people went there for education, they went there for work, they went there for all different sorts of reasons for vacation. So we have those nexus. So Russia, in a sense, sees Ukraine in that kind of historical point of view. But what has happened and evolved over time, because with those ownerships come economic systems, social systems, political systems. Many of those countries that were once of that persuasion, and you're speaking about the Poland and the Estonias and Lithuanias and so on and so forth in that area, have over a period of time moved away towards Western philosophies and a different interpretation of democracy. And they've also moved away in terms of the understanding of the economic system that should drive the societies, where most of them have been graduating towards a more capitalist form of organization. People tell you Russia still adheres to what they speak about state capitalism. And we see, to get a little ahead of myself, what that means. There are very few places in the world, you tend to speak about the state and the existence of these oligarchs. Oligarchs means that there are people who are filthy rich, whether it's from oil wealth or other state-assisted wealth creation. And such that in Russia, 85% of the gross domestic product are from those who are very, very rich, the oligarchs, and the other 15% is for the rest. Now, you have to make a determination whether a country that on the one hand is saying that we're for all people, we believe in an egalitarian or a society of equality. That is reflected or captures the spread of the bread, as against not that we don't have those discriminations and polarities in the United States and other parts of the world, but at least you get a sense of an ongoing struggle to have more equality of opportunities and in the society. So you found that a lot of those countries drifted off towards Western philosophies, and in the process, they also came to the conclusion that their strength in numbers because they realized they cannot withstand the independence that they're fighting and struggling for, on the democratic tradition they're aspiring towards, on their own volition. And therefore, if we are a member of a collective unit from a security vantage point, we may be better protected. And they've joined what is called the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, whose fundamental argument is that if it touch one, it touch all. We tend to say that in terms of family situation.
Right.
We have it at a much smaller scale, even in our circle, elements or aspects of that, because we are responsible in for our own law and order provisions, but we don't have a standing army. We may figure that the special service unit or black squad may be the force to go to something if we had a serious civil uprising. But out of an abundance of caution, we have what we call down a regional security system,
RSS, right?
Which functions, knock on wood, especially in times of natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, you name it, the volcano, the common land assistance. We have had only one or two situations in which they have been activated for military purposes, like in the Grenada situation, where you had the violent overthrow between Bishop and Morris Court. Morris Bishop, sorry, and Bernard Court. Where they were invited in by the prime ministers of the day to bring back peace and stability to the region. And we have also seen them at a much smaller level at other times where you had little oppressed protestation and other things where so look, we don't think we can handle it. Send us some additional helping hands. So that people do see and appreciate that in a sense. So we have that kind of reason to understand ourselves in our part. So in that exercise, Ukraine had not yet up to date become a member of NATO, but its political systems clearly have changed, where they had figured that now we're establishing their independence 40-something years ago. And we're in our 40s to where independence is concerned, even though we've been a democratic country since 1951. Huh? But we tend to think of our independence from 79.
Right.
Because in that hiatus we were on a thing, and in the process they are contemplating joining the other colleagues, the Polands and so on and so forth, and moving towards the NATO membership. In addition to that, you see in this week, in a move that will further frustrate our now Russia, they're talking about becoming members of the European Union. The European Union is a whole hell of massive economic, political, and social system. In essence, they're moving further and further from the Russian ethos. But what is important in that is that the share common borders, Ukraine.
Yeah, the neighbors, and there's nothing you can change about that.
That's
geography.
That's your geography.
Right.
We can't think about it in Simmons and the Grenadines in that kind of way and saying a piece of something we want to break with. So this is a little too close to comfort. So we think we need to have a look see on what's happening here.
NATO, the possibility of NATO being right at your back door.
They get a little too close to our borders. You're right at my back door, big brother, you're looking over me, and they don't like that.
Oh, so it comes across as a threat.
It's a threat. They see it as a threat to empire and a threat to the own security. They see that.
But how does invading Ukraine eliminate that threat?
Well, I don't think that in any way it eliminates that. But we're not always able to explain what's in the minds of world leaders at times. You notice them dancing and skating around that because there are other countries who have world views of empire and sense of belonging and ownership. You have the perennial arguments of China and Taiwan, for example.
Mhm.
And that is probably work in progress or sort of waiting to happen. And a lot of people have to hold their head if, God forbid, something like that takes place. And there you will see,
Why is it holding that we end of
well,
the world or something?
you'll see a different dynamic in that situation. Because if you notice, for example, and this is very careful discussion, um, America, out of its centuries of years of experience, many of them have had unprecedented in Afghanistan in the latest, has been so reluctant to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. So they're not directly warring with Russia per se, and avoiding those outcomes. So they come through the NATO membership, okay, and
Mm.
support NATO.
You're looking really deep into the strategy there, Mitch.
Yeah, but that's
Uh,
what's happened. But with respect to a Taiwan, which I don't want to delve in and spend a lot of time in, America has a position. We are supporting Taiwan. This has nothing to do with NATO membership or Asian membership, whatever it is.
mhm.
If you go and invade or do anything to Taiwan, we are going to lend the Taiwanese assistance. So you see the potential for direct military conflict if China Taiwan issues was to escalate or elevate to the level of the Russian Ukraine situation.
Mhm. Do you think that that might be the rationale behind other countries taking a similar stance,
Well,
only sending military equipment rather than saying, okay, I'm going to send troops? Are they avoiding a direct conflict, per se, with Russia?
well, there are more than one thing to discuss there.
Mm.
And I listened to a particular analysis last night. I thought that was interesting because people are saying, well, look, yes, the Ukrainians put up a good fight, but they are in the process also losing a lot of lives. Hmm? And here you have this 60, 70, how many foot long, miles long, sorry, set of troops stuck in Ukraine headed for Kiev. Hmm? But nobody doing anything about it. And it's good to have all these sets of sanctions that is applying pressure. But it would be a better thing if we go fighting them, I would say, instruments man to man.
Mhm.
Let's shoot them down. And so, America, if you're not doing it, why doesn't NATO do it?
Mhm.
And the people say, well, look, if NATO physically goes into Ukraine, that will please Putin. Why? Because the sympathies that the ordinary Russian person now has against Russia being on Ukrainian soil, fighting their own brothers and sisters, their own blood, because many of them are of the same family tree. Hmm?
Mhm.
They may not have it if Putin now made the argument. Well, you see what I tell you? Those people over the NATO, all those sets of countries, is who really want to interfere in Russian business. They may change the sympathies, and Putin may get more of an understanding in a war with Russia and those NATO member countries than they will have between Russia and Ukraine. So they're saying that the politics has to be very careful. Now, you could be sure, but nobody's fooling anybody in that dynamics. I listened to one report sometime last week, which said Ukrainian pilots were going over to Poland to collect fighter jets to lend support to the Ukrainian battle. I can believe that. I can believe that is possible.
Mhm.
But what's the difficulty in that? The jets will not land and stay in Ukraine because Russia will blow them up by because they're in Ukrainian territory. So what do they do? Land them back in Poland. Now, if they land them back in Poland, don't you think that Russia is going to interpret that? That Poland has joined the war, just as Belarus has joined the war, and figure, look, if you send a plane from over there to come over here and they carry it back over there, then you're fair game. So you see how world wars can begin to spread. So it's a very dicey and tricky situation. That's another dynamic aspect of it. But look at the voting that took place as well.
Yeah.
141 countries condemned Russia invading into Ukraine. But there's a fairly sizable numbers that abstain.
About 39.
They didn't say yay or nay. I mean, only 5 supported, only 5. But in those 39 that abstained is China.
Yeah. That was
It
highlighted.
must be highlighted because China want to say, well, when Russia and Ukraine had a war, we didn't back talk. So yeah, so if I now do this, with Taiwan, don't say nothing either. That's the best I could do for you. You understand what I mean? You understand?
Wow.
So it is a very uncomfortable international situation at the moment that the United Nations and the community must be uneasy about. Um, well, you can imagine if I want to be mischievous, if something like that was to happen. China, Taiwan, for example. Look at the dynamics in the equation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
I don't want to think about that right now, but
We
let's
do
hold on.
exactly.
Let's just stick to what's happening.
You
As
see
she created that we're
that?
gonna.
Right?
Oh, we could just abstain.
Well,
Can we?
St. Vincent could abstain from supporting Taiwan. The amount of Vincentian students we have in Taiwan,
Taiwan.
the amount of scholarships, the amount of social, economic, and all kind of things that Taiwan sponsors in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we think Vincentian sympathies are going to be with, and we think the
Okay,
government
so
sympathies are going to be with.
it's obvious where
Yes, it becomes very messy. And like you, I take shelter. I don't want to go forward with that because yes, well,
let's not think
I
about
don't want to see
that.
that. I don't want to see that play out at all.
No, I mean, let
I don't
other
want to see it
people
play out.
talk about it. Let's
Yeah,
not think about that.
but
Let's cross our fingers.
but the point is, it is
Mm.
easy for us to speak about these things at a distance.
Mhm.
The other things that people have to gather from it is the national ethos. Husbands taking their families and wives to safety and return to fight. Brothers seeing the sisters off to safety, returning to fight.
Mhm. Mhm.
Cultural artists finding a way to signal and fighting with Ukraine, Miss Ukraine. Sports icons, boxing, tennis, football, um, you name it,
Mhm.
putting down the sporting equipment to fight for the nation state. That tells you that there's some fervor among the Ukrainian people that has to be appreciated and respected.
Ordinary people taking
Yes,
up.
and that the president was one time a comedian. Well, it shows you that he really had to be acting. I mean, because he is now the love of many people in the world in
Yeah,
terms of the inspiring leadership that he's providing.
yeah. He's coming across as a real MVP because
Yes.
something that was said was that not that was said, but America said, okay, we can send you something to fly you out. He said, no, I don't want to leave. I need some assistance,
Yeah.
not a flight out of my own country.
Yes.
And it just goes to show you that is that the general response from the average world leader? Let me put average there. Whenever there's conflict within a country, you get the president or prime minister of the state to safety as opposed to expecting him to join the civilians who put their lives on the line, expecting them to also put their lives on the line to fight for that same country.
And we don't have to go too far, Crystal, for the answer because we had the Afghanistan situation not so long ago,
Mhm.
where the president literally flew the coup. He got out of there, and what happened? There was an instant collapse of Afghanistan by the Taliban, which put America into the most embarrassing situation right now, trying to have to go into this massive rescue situation of his own people and Afghans out of there, and has consequences. And that's not the only war case in which the leaders have run on the threat. But you see, in the one hand now in Ukraine, you have inspiring leadership,
Mhm.
and in Afghanistan, it was very demotivated, and the society just collapsed. I'm sure that if the president of Ukraine had taken a position to go to safety, you would have had far less people volunteering
Mhm.
to be in defense of the motherland, as it were, the home country.
Mhm.
Now, you want to bring that to Stevens?
Bring what?
So, Crystal, let me,
Bring what specifically?
Crystal, let me
Come, break it down,
so let
break it down,
let me
Major.
provoke your thought pattern.
Oh boy,
And my friend here, what's his name?
Lano, DJ Lano.
Let me say if Crystal and I ask Lano. Lano, imagine tomorrow morning, United States of America says, we have woken up this morning on the right side, we feel good. And we're going to send a few cruise ships to St. Vincent and Grenadines, some at Camden Park, and they can pull in some at Calico, some at the Kingston Harbour, and the other harbours. And for the next 48 hours, Vincent's who are free to leave St. Vincent and Grenadines can leave. What happens to St. Vincent and Grenadines? Lano. Do I ask you? A lot of people drunk by highway trading and on backstage and saying in the intersection, you know. Well, I mean, if the traffic police abandon the job, so I think every man for himself. Huh? The country empty. So you see this love of country thing. That's a crude interpretation of it.
The country will not be empty, Major, because one, the ships
holding on.
The ships. Yeah, I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna fight. Right. The other reason why the country would not be empty.
Yes.
Because the ships would not be able to hold 110,000 people. So there's not enough space where everybody.
The ships might sink.
I'm gonna stay here and
that's an answer, Crystal, but I'm sure they more about it. But I just want to show
that we will abandon
Yes.
ship. That's not nice.
It's not nice.
It's not nice. But what?
No,
man, I don't know. It's true. I'm not saying it's true. But what would give you that impression that if we were in a similar circumstance that Vincentians would run to safety?
Because for a lot of people, life is precious, and the vast majority of Vincentians at this time, vast majority of Vincentians at this time are not in sync with their government. That
vast majority.
Yeah, the majority of Vincentians are not in lockstep with the government. You can measure that. You can measure that by the fact that the administration of today is a minority administration at the last polls.
That's according to a constitution.
Well, not the constitution, but it's an instrument that we always can measure, and we have trusted it. I mean, 20 years ago, the Unity Labour Party had 10,000 more votes than the New Democratic Party. That's a historical fact.
Mm-hmm.
They had 10,000 more votes 20 years ago than the New Democratic Party. 20 years after, the New Democratic Party has more votes.
How much more votes?
400, 500 something, but it means it has pulled back all 10,000, and it means over 10,000 people have changed their minds. In addition to the significant number of opposition supporters who have had to go abroad to make a new life for themselves. Now, I want to...
We could argue that, though. We could argue that, okay, so the ULP were able to swing over some votes on their side to get into government. We could argue and say that the opposition, the NDP, they have failed to get back those 10,000 plus some, so that they could be in a position to get back into government for elections.
No?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily come as... We can look at it as a failure on the ULP side. So they have been losing popularity, but
they remain in government.
They're still in government. We can also look at it from the opposition side. They have failed to get the support sufficient to get right. So they failed to get the sufficient support to win an election
at the constituency
for 20. The Constitution overrides everything, Major. So we have to look at the Constitution. So they have failed in that regard to get back into government. If you look at it from two sides.
I am trying to be fair on both sides. I know that the national people feel that I have to have bias. Mm-hmm. If you go back to 1998, we had the same scenario. The New Democratic Party, we have shifted our discussion, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit.
We exited. We gotta go to a sponsor segment.
The New Democratic Party was in government, but had lost the will of the majority. They had the most seats, but the less amount of people. The same situation has presented itself now in 2020, with the government of the day having the most constituencies, but not the most votes.
So the hope is for the next elections for things to swing around.
You have to have votes.
Why after
most votes and most constituencies.
Okay. All right. We will end with that because I feel that we'll take over the rest of the morning. Okay, so we have to stop right now and take a quick break. Right, we got to pay the bills. Thank you so much for joining the live. We will get to the responses that came in through the live and of course through WhatsApp. Okay, so now it's time for a break.